Hey everyone, welcome to today's video. Welcome to the Video Game Fight School channel. Thank you very much for tuning in. So at the DC Fandom event of 2020, this video is, in my opinion, one of the most critical pieces of information that we have about Gotham Knights till date. It was a gameplay sequence narrated by Patrick Redding, who's a creative director of Gotham Knights. And within this particular gameplay clip, he mentioned things like this is a pre-alpha capture. He mentioned that this was actually halfway through the Mr. Freeze storyline. He also mentioned that this gameplay clip was coming from about a dozen or so hours into Batgirl's progression. Now, just some of these key points that he mentioned alone could just clue us into exactly what it is that this gameplay progression is about. Now, here's the problem. It appears that the gameplay progression itself is actually quite complex, and in a 7-minute clip where he basically made mention of a few things, it's highly impossible for him to have given a lot of details at that time. Now, there is something also quite unique. At the end of this particular gameplay encounter, Batgirl makes her way into this little makeshift cave and finds out that Mr. Freeze is behind all of this stuff. Mr. Freeze shows up. He makes his villainous comment. He talks about exactly what it is his goals are. She basically is, challenging him and trying to tell him, I will stop you. And then as the villain and as Batgirl and Robin start to fight against Mr. Freeze, we then saw something that was quite interesting. Floating damage numbers. Now, many people basically freaked out because floating damage numbers, as much as they are a good thing, it's just something that after the Arkham games, we haven't necessarily seen them as a system that would be adopted in an Arkham game in terms of combat. Another thing too is if you even pay a lot of attention around the beginning of the gameplay reveal, Batgirl and Robin were fighting bad guys and villains, and even in her combat system and sequence, she did also, exhibit some of these damage numbers, but they were not necessarily as pronounced when she was actually fighting because, for some strange reason, the text and the font colors were different. It was white and yellow text. But by the time we got to Mr. Freeze, the text colors were red and a little bit more pronounced. So I think this was something that was quite interesting because perhaps maybe this is kind of indicative that you're fighting a boss, and so the fight actually has more stake in it. I mean, you see the white and the yellow, and then when she does some critical moves based on one of her abilities, then you start seeing that he gets these red damage numbers. And so again, this pronouncement of the damage numbers was something that was quite interesting in the conversation. Now, Patrick Redding mentioned something, and I think it really did explain why we are seeing the damage numbers, but I'm not necessarily sure it allowed for us to embrace whatever it is the damage numbers are about. He mentioned that whenever it is you're fighting a bad guy at a specific level as your character is progressing, that bad guy is pretty much going to respond based on the level that you are fighting him on. And he mentioned something along the lines of saying fighting Mr. Freeze is going to be different when you fight him at level 5 at least, or compared to level 50 if you are fighting him. Now, this is also another huge loaded aspect of this whole reveal, because if you're going to be fighting Mr. Freeze at different levels, I wonder what it meant. Now, I think the answer is quite simple in exactly what he said, that particular mission that you were watching in the gameplay reveal was halfway through the Mr. Freeze mission. So basically, the Mr. Freeze storyline is something that, in my opinion, I think is going to be continuing over the course of the game in different capacities and different aspects. And so what we just saw was just a slice of whatever it is that we're going to be dealing with Mr. Freeze. So potentially you'll fight Mr. Freeze and then maybe deal with him or investigate him as you're leveling up, maybe even encounter him once or twice, and then again down the road as you've become a stronger character, you're going to be seeing Mr. Freeze. So even though the cosmetic side of the way the combat looks in terms of the floating damage numbers are not the best in my opinion, I still think they actually gave us a very huge clue as to what we should be expecting in terms of the combat and the progression, your leveling system, and your character in Gotham Knights. Now, here's one small pet peeve that I'm going to pretty much just highlight in this video. I wish and I hope that they would remove the damage numbers, or at least give you the player the option to remove the floating damage numbers. You see, a lot of us that are in the Batman fan base are coming from another video game where we didn't have damage numbers. We just beat the bad guys, and the bad guys basically, fell under the influence of taking very heavy blows from us. Now, in saying this, when you're looking at the combat, I think what really did make that combat stand out with the Arkham games are more about the effects and even some of the abilities that you had. I'm not saying Gotham Knights doesn't have these abilities. We haven't seen the plethora of abilities that your knights have, but at least I think there has to be something that makes the combat unique enough where we don't necessarily have to, deal with the way the floating damage numbers show up in this Gotham Knights build that they revealed to us at a DC fandom event last year. And so that's just all it is. It's just a cosmetic change. Even, some developers have found ways around this because the floating damage is actually really nice for some people. And even in the context of some games, I play another video game heavily, Tom Clancy's The Division, and I do like floating damage numbers actually in that game. So it's not something that I actually hate or actually detest in terms of every single game. I'm just saying that, in context of the, the Arkham games and other games that have been played, and even games that Warner Brothers Games Montreal themselves have made, they made Arkham Origins and there weren't any damage floating numbers. I would say that that's something that they need to consider, at least allowing the option from a UI perspective where you, the player, can just turn that off. Now, I think it'll be in the game. It's something that, is in my opinion anyways, a quality of life change or quality of life feature that I think they need to add. But again, that's just a small thing. More importantly, I think it tells us exactly what we might be seeing in terms of progression and in terms of the different characters. So as you're dealing with these enemy NPCs, you as a character, and as you're dealing with a story, you're going to be getting stronger. You're going to be getting more XP. XP is kind of the gateway for you to be able to level up your abilities, level up your skills. This has been common practice in the Arkham games forever, and this is something that I think we're probably going to be also, seeing in Gotham Knights as well. But I just wanted to share that in this video. I appreciate you guys for, taking the time to listen. I would love to hear your thoughts in the comment section. I would love to know if you are a fan or if you are fond of the way they've presented the damage dealing values or factors, or if you think it needs to be something that you as a player can just turn off and probably not have to, have any need of over the course of your gameplay, or if it's something that, as an option, you, even as a player, if you want it to be in the game, can just leave it turned on the UI. Talk to you guys in another video. Thank you so much for your time and audience. Peace out.